What's up? So today I'm going to be discussing about something that has been discussed in the SCP-3812 fandom for a while, and that is SCP-3812 transcending endless thoughts of endless narratives. Now, if you don't know what a narrative is, it is basically a story. Like beings within that story, he thinks that they are real, from fictional humans and beings, regular beings, to literal platonic concepts, like literally. So it's like SCP-3812 transcends endless stacks of endless narratives, meaning that he basically transcends infinite stories which fuse the previous as mere fiction, and each of those alone have a gap of endless stacks of endless narratives on their own, and so on and so forth. So he transcends like an uncountably amount of infinite and beyond infinite narratives, basically. And also, SCP-3812 is actually like high outerversal. Like I've heard a lot of people thinking that he's like beyond author level, which is basically like not true. Like he only transcends like the avatar of the author, which is nowhere near as powerful as the real one. So like being a high 1A tier is very impressive, but beings in the Verse and Dimensions wiki are actually much more powerful than that. Like there are beings like the Creator, Hyperman, not the Hyperman from DC, that is, if you guys are familiar with him. And Fantasia is actually one of my most favorite characters, by the way. The Super God Council and the Rule Breaker, and like all of these guys stands infinitely above even Omniversal. So it's like, you know what? I'm just going to create my own verse, which stands infinitely above outerversal and omniversal. Like that's what I've been thinking in my mind recently. Like I have created the reality verse in a few months ago or something, or I've created my first fictional universe like in 2020, basically when the COVID-19 thing still happens and there's no vaccine. So yeah, basically. So like these entities in the Verse and Dimensions wiki, I'm inspired of to create my own verse with similar powers. Although you're probably wondering, oh, they're beyond omnipotent. Well, no, they're not beyond omnipotent whatsoever. So like the Verse and Dimensions wiki have made it very clear, while despite them being beyond omniversal, they are still below omnipotent. Because the reason why the Verse and Dimensions wiki fandom created something much more powerful than outerversal or omniversal is due to the fact that an omnipotent entity, like an omniverse, is not the limit to how an omnipotent entity can create. Because if so, it's similar to an outerversal being or an infinite-plex dimensional being, just to keep it simple, and the omniverse being a trans-infinite dimensional structure, by the way, is similar to how an outerversal being or infinite-plex dimensional being create an infinite dimensional structure, and they are nowhere near omnipotent. So like, the omniverse has to be created by some omega infinite dimensional being or something, or whatever. So it's like these guys are like above low to high outerversal, like by default. Like thanks to my discovery of like Verse and Dimensions wiki, I decided to create my own verse, in which has similar cosmological structures but very different at the same time, and has a lot more powerful entities within it, basically. So it's like despite them being above omniversal in the Verse and Dimensions wiki fandom, they are nowhere near omnipotent, basically. So the omnipotent being within the Verse and Dimensions wiki fandom is basically like, the true God. So like the true God stands on top of the Verse and Dimensions wiki's tier of entities, basically. And also there's also this entity called the Demiurge, in which can exist in any tier, even omnipotent ones. But I think that's kinda irrelevant. So, yeah, basically. So the reason why I want to create this video is due to the fact that to tell you guys that omniversal is not like the limit of a cosmological structure. Like they can still be higher. Like despite them being higher, they're still below omnipotent. You have to follow that rule first. And also, beings from like the Verse and Dimensions wiki views outerversal as like child's play in comparison. Like seriously, like if SCP-3812 is like high outerversal, that would basically mean that he's still father compared to the likes of the Creator, who basically like created this entire omniverse. But it's still nowhere near omnipotent, and also still infinitely below the Hyperman, and also infinitely above Fantasio, stands above the creator and destroyer and so on, and stands infinitely above the Super God Council, which stands infinitely above the creator, destroyer, and Hyperman. Basically, Hyperman is like this guy who basically like balances the balance between the creator and destroyer, basically. So it's like, despite outerversal and omniversal being impressive, they're like nowhere near where Verse and Dimensions Wiki's most powerful non-omnipotent beings can go. Like the First and Dimensions Wikis and the All Dimensions Wiki, in which I have explored for a while, like the White Plane for instance, or something like that, like pushes the boundaries of how high a cosmological structure or an entity can be pushed to its limits, like, of how far you can go being like beyond omniversal, but still below omnipotent. You have to follow that first. Okay. Also, I've heard a lot of people in the Verse and Dimensions Wiki saying that the Fantasia, which lives in the Transcendentum, which is above beyond space, which is above the outside, which is above the Godverse, which contains the Creator, the Destroyer, and Hyperman. And basically, so like, the Super God Council stands infinitely above the outside, right? As when I heard about the Beyond Universe size comparison video. And the outside stands infinitely above the Godverse and Omniverse, which basically contains like their own Creator, Destroyer, and Hyperman, which contains which basically like Hyperman, once again, basically balances all of creation like as a whole. So basically, like, Verse and Dimensions Wiki have a lot of OP characters. And also, I've heard in the Verse and Dimensions Wiki fandom that outerversal still apply to these characters because they're still below omnipotent. But that's not true whatsoever. Like, if you're beyond omniversal but still below omnipotent, that would still make you basically make you beyond any character that is outerversal in every story in existence, basically. You see, I created my reality verse similar to that of the Verse and Dimensions Wiki fandom, but with different cosmological structures, basically. So it's like, you got to think bigger beyond outerversal and omniversal. Like, there are still things beyond omniversal like that. So you see, these guys from the Verse and Dimensions Wiki fandom, including the Reality Verse, which contains the Complex Verse, which is a verse that stands infinitely above the Omniverse, which contains infinite omniverses, stands infinitely below the Transverse, and the Transverse contains contains infinitely many complex verses, which contains infinite omniverses, and the Divine Verse, and so on and so forth, up till the Omniscient Verse, which is basically a mind of the supreme being of the Reality Verse, called the Ultimate Creator, basically. So it's beings in the Verse and Dimensions Wiki and the Reality Verse, which includes entities within it, makes outerversal look like, child's play by comparison. And the only beings that can really beat them are omnipotent beings, in all sense of the word. You have to think bigger, beyond outerversal omniverse. Besides, there are still more out there, beyond it. So you see, the only characters that can beat Verse and Dimensions Wikis, beings and also Verse and Dimensions Wikis, Verse and Dimensions Wikis entities, including the Reality Verse ones, are omnipotent beings by themselves, which would include the One Above All and the Rider, and so on and so forth. And you have actually pointed out that I'm missing the Presence from DC. Well, I've actually watched Webcam Parrot's debunk on this type of a type of myth that the Presence is the supreme being of DC, which is basically not true, according to Webcam Parrot, who has introduced a lot of evidence to prove it, in which I agree with it, I guess. And also, if you really want to compete against the Verse and Dimensions Wiki, which I did it as well with my Reality Verse, and you also want to compete against mine, you can do it. If you want to create something Beyond Omnipotence and solo my verse and the Verse and Dimensions Wiki, well, you're free to do so, or something. Basically, Beyond Omnipotence fallacy, no famous fallacy, so yeah, basically. So if you wanted to create something beyond beyond omnipotence or something, which basically violates no famous fallacy, by the way, then you're free to do so, or something similar to Sug's verse, basically. And so basically, like, in order to compete, like, the Verse and Dimensions wiki stands above like all of them. And also, I saw one commenter saying that the reality should should the Verse and Dimensions wiki be treated as its own fictional universes with their own entities that stands infinitely above non-omnipotent entities from other universes who are outerversal, and the Verse and Dimensions wikis entities make them look like child's play in comparison? And my answer is like, yeah, but I can't actually comment on that thing, so this is just based on my opinion. You can free to do your own opinion, by the way. And also, like, the Verse and Dimensions wiki should be treated like its own universe, like its own fictional universe, with non-omnipotent entities standing infinitely above, like, omnipotent entities, such as Darkseid and Orion. And like, these outerversal beings might be impressive, but again, they are still infinitely below, like, baseline beings such as the Creator, or even baseline like the Creator, who is non-omnipotent. And even the Super God Council, Fantasia from the Transcendentum, and including the higher Guardian and the Guardian of the Fifth Wall in the Verse and Dimensions wiki, and even the Rule Breaker himself, which stands infinitely above all of these gods. Well, there are beings that stand infinitely above him as well, so yeah. But despite this, like, the Rule Breaker like has very few superiors, basically. So like, if you really want to create a verse similar to that, a Verse and Dimensions wiki, then do it. Besides, it's basically a competition of which is the strongest, basically. So anyways, guys, that's it for the video. And like, make sure you got, and also, before I end this video, once again, I saw that you see like SCP-3812 like transcends endless stacks of endless narratives, right? While viewing the SCP continuity as fiction makes you like high outerverse. But even then, it would still be child's play in comparison to the beings such as the Creator from Verse and Dimensions wiki, and the Rule Breaker, and so on and so forth, up until the True God, basically, who is like omnipotent. But the Rule Breaker and the Creator aren't omnipotent, and yet they still stands infinitely above like high outerversal, like by default. Which should be like logical sense, considering that there is no limit to what an omnipotent being could create, whether a cosmological structure that stands infinitely above omniversal or not. But I would like to say that an omniverse is like not the true limitation of what an omnipotent being can create, basically. So yeah, anyways, so basically like SCP-3812 would be like father like compared to the beings in the Verse and Dimensions, basically. So yeah, anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications, and peace out.